Welcome to the Grounded Path, Tools for Soul. I'm Emma Muir. This podcast is for men who are tired of carrying everything alone, tired of performing who they think they should be, and ready to connect with who they truly are. Together, we'll explore self-awareness, emotional intelligence, fatherhood, relationships, and the beliefs that shape how we show up in the world. Because the goal isn't to become someone else, the goal is to come home to yourself. So let's begin. Hey there and welcome. I always feel like I'm a bit of a game show host when I start to record these, and I try not to get into that mode of, hey, how are you doing? And I guess that really plays into what I'm wanting to talk to you about today and what I want to share. It's something that I've learned along the way, and I do talk about it often, and that is people don't learn from what you say, they learn from who you are. That's been one of the biggest things that I've learned in 25 years of personal development work, is that you start to have this radar almost for who's real and who's not. And yeah, I gotta say, you know, people can say all the wonderful things that they want to say, but you can absolutely pick up on who they are, you know. So I want to start by asking you some questions. And these are definitely things that I've done, and I've worked with clients around these. And I think for me, they became really important questions when I started to understand that I could say all the pretty words, but if who I was being wasn't aligned with that, then one, I really couldn't connect. And two, you know, as a parent, I couldn't really guide and teach and raise my beautiful babes as I truly wanted to, you know, in being my most authentic self. So I want to ask you, how often do you focus on what you do? Or, and not or, how often do you focus on who you're being? And are those two things aligned? I'll cover this over the time that we speak. I'm bound to be honest, as I riff on through this, because I definitely see that those two things are aligned. They definitely are, because what you do and who you are, if they're misaligned, then there's a disconnect. And you might already feel that disconnect with the words that you're saying and how you actually feel, who you truly feel like. Now, as I mentioned before about personal development, there are some traps which I've uncovered along the way of my many years doing it. And I've fallen into many of them as well. So some of them are things like communication techniques, parenting strategies, leadership frameworks, emotional regulation tools. None of those are bad, and I absolutely assure you, I have, in the 10 years that I've been in coaching, I've 100% done all of them, trying to share and teach and guide. And why are they a trap? Because none of them are particularly bad, like I said, but all that become performative when they are disconnected from genuine self-awareness. So you can be taught all the communication techniques that you need to, and you can be given all the scripts that you need to. And I see it consistently in the personal development space. Here is a script of what you can say when you're with your partner. here is a script of what you can say or do when you're in a work situation, because I've done all of that stuff. And, you know, even in parenting strategies, like here are a multitude of strategies that you can follow so that you can get your teen through your teen years in, you know, a really loving way. And here are ways to emotionally regulate. Here's a checklist of what you can go through. And like I said, none of them are bad. And I've done lots of leadership frameworks as well, not particularly in my business, because the more I moved into the leadership space and working with leaders, I understood that there was no one particular style as a leader. And I couldn't even break it down into categories of if you're this kind of leader, if you're that kind of leader, because that's a trap. You are not the same as your mate that's working in his business. We are not the same even if we're working in and have our own businesses. We're not the same. We have different stories, we have different patterns, and it's in the getting to know yourself, in having that really genuine, honest self-awareness, that you can move away from performing communication, parenting, leadership, emotional regulation. Actually be in it. Because I see it a lot. And I've tried to follow, you know, in all the courses that I've done and the workshops that I've been to and the speakers that I've heard, you know, when they have this 5 steps to great parenting or 5 steps to strong leadership, I know only 1 in 10 of those people that are actually go out and try will get some traction from it. And it's only in when they can adapt it and understand themselves within it that they can try a few of those techniques and they might work. And so when we talk about, and really this conversation that I'm sharing you was born from another conversation that I had about, you know, when parents, like, you know, do as I say, not as I do, that old adage. And, you know, as parents, we're definitely moving away from that because we understand more and more and more and more that children always know, don't they? And particularly teenagers, they just are like these truth detectors, I want to say. My teenagers are anyway. If I'm ever being the slightest full of shit, or not so much full of shit because I'm a really fucking bad liar, so they know, except if it's about a surprise. I want to use that cadence. If it's like a really good surprise, apparently I can lie my ass off. Oh, I don't know anything. Oh, they can pick up on the subtleties, knowing me so well. But some surprises, I've been able to like really contain myself and be able to surprise them and not share stuff with them. Because the thing is, kids are really great pattern detectors. Extraordinary, you might say. And, you know, the younger the child is, the less they'll be able to communicate it. But teenagers, when they're starting to separate themselves and move through that stage of moving from being a child into being an adult, there's this between stage where they're finding their voice and what they want to say. And so truth becomes really harsh in the way that they deliver it. But it's like they are a heat-seeking missile for it. They'll call bullshit the first sign that they get because they're in their most sensitive states. And so again, the younger the child, they may not understand the details, and even teenagers, but they will understand these very clear aspects of picking up a pattern, of picking up behavior that's misaligned. Because what they will pick up on is the energetics. And again, they may not understand it, but they pick up on the tension. They definitely know when you're being present and they feel your presence. They know when you're avoiding something. And do you know why they know when you're avoiding something? Because they're probably avoiding a whole bunch of things, so they can pick up a pattern because it's so familiar to them. They can also pick up on authenticity. Now, I know that this is more challenging online, but I'll say this, my three babes will often, I'll be like, oh, do you think this post is real? Or do you think they're being real? And it's a question that we ask all the time. So it is something that they particularly look for. It's something that I look for. And so that is not something I just say, that is something that I am being as well. So it's very aligned, and they've been able to learn that from me because they're learning from what I do, not just what I say. So they're looking for authenticity as well. They will understand connection, and they definitely understand safety. They feel all of those things: tension, presence, avoidance, authenticity, connection, safety, long before they can ever explain it. Long, long before. And part of that conversation came out that really what I was speaking to dads, and I want to continue that conversation actually. I was speaking to dads about how they relate to their daughters in particular and sons, because what that really speaks to is emotional leadership. Now, like I said, they can pick up on all those different aspects well before they even are able to communicate and verbalize, and it can't, before they really deeply understand it at an emotional structure level, at even an intellectual level. Because you got to remember, our children are moving through their own transition in life, and it can't be easy. I don't remember being given a choice about being able to move through being a kid to a teenager. I just remember being really fucking confused. But so I want to continue that conversation, because I think emotional leadership for dads is something that is really missing, and it's missing from the conversation, and it's missing from the practice of it as well. So it is different, daughters and sons, because sons are looking at their dads as an example of who they are going to be. And daughters are looking for their dad for very different things. So for daughters, they're looking through for relationship standards, emotional safety, like what to look for to feel emotionally safe, respect and presence. They're looking for those things. They're looking to gain an understanding of, they're asking their dads to show them the way, show them how they deserve to be treated, the value of them. And so that all comes into relationship standards, right? And for sons, it is very different. It's firstly the permission to feel. Like dads have mums can show their sons how to feel, but it's such a different relationship. And, you can say right or wrong, dads and mums can teach each other the same things. I would continually offer a different perspective on that. I'll continually have the conversation that I cannot. I can show my son and I can give him permission to feel, but he views me in a different way that he views his dad. So sons with their dads are looking for that permission to feel. And I'm going to use this term really loosely, and then let's define it a little bit, and that's healthy masculinity. Because I think the permission to feel and having an understanding about your emotions, how to communicate them, that leads into emotional responsibility and that self-trust. So when their dad displays those things, boys have an understanding that being a man, masculinity, isn't built on being strong and the defined strong that's out there at the moment. The stoic, the contained. Because as a mum and as a partner, sometimes he very much shows up as a man, but my partner sometimes needs me to be contained while he's feeling his way through something, because I'm not the only person that experiences stress in a relationship. I'm not the only person that has a lot of things going on and needs to emotionally express. He may do it in a completely different way than I do. However, having that presence, showing the way in that, is important to be able to find the balance. But as a mum, sometimes I do need to offer that place of containment and being solid and being able to hold that space for when my kids are feeling, when my babes do need to have all of their feelings, sometimes all at once. And do I do it properly all the time? Definitely not. But I feel like with dads, there is that real layer of that missing. Because just as much as they're showing their daughters about relationship standards, they definitely are showing their sons. Because they will learn from not, oh, you should respect your mum, to how they respect the mum. And this was an interesting one that came up for me, and I really started to see it more and more because I'm separated, divorced, and have been 8 years. I think it's going up to 9, maybe 8 years now. And what I've learned is that he has a new partner, but my babes weren't looking at how he was treating her. They were looking at how he treated me still, even in separation, even in a new family dynamic and what it looked like. And that came from both sides. So, and you can see in that they weren't learning from instruction. They weren't learning from, oh, you should respect your mum, and it's okay to cry. But if that's not being modeled, then they've got nothing to observe. So it's not learning through instruction, it's learning through observation. And like I said before, kids pick up on patterns. And as they get older, those patterns become their own habits and their own beliefs and their own thinking. Now, when dads start doing the inner work and they start really looking at their own patterns, then they will move from questions, like asking themselves questions around, they'll be asking themselves, instead of asking, what should I do? They will move into a really important question, and that is, who am I being? Because every relationship is responding to that answer. Every single relationship that you're in, including the one with yourself, is responding to, who am I being? And that comes from aligning with your thoughts, knowing what's going on in your mind, understanding the consequence of the actions that you take, and just not consequences like how it impacts you, but the consequences of how it impacts other people, and particularly people in your close circle, particularly dads, your children. And so I'm really interested to come back and let's start asking some questions around, how are you showing up when you experience Who are you being when you experience being challenged? Who are you experience when you're in I don't want to say a fight, but when you're in disagreement with your partner, your wife? How do you show up in that around your children? And I mean, because I've learned a lot of different ways in the way that I wasn't raised by my dad. He was not around. It's a very different time, 70s and 80s, with dads and how they were allowed to show up and all the things. So I learned some very different things around how we deal with tension. But I wonder, for you, what are you teaching your children? What are you... Because that's the other thing, right, that makes me think about, that I think about when I talk about this, is that you're teaching other people how you want to be treated. So in tension, in conflict, if you avoid, you're teaching people to leave you alone. And you're teaching people not to communicate with you. You're teaching people to walk away. And that doesn't offer a space for connection. But when you can sit in an uncomfortable conversation and sit in the tension of it, then you're teaching your partner, hey, I want to stay close. I want to stay connected. You're safe here. And vice versa. Like me as a partner, I do stay in the tension. I do stay in that moment where there's like a conversation that's hard. I stay in the hard conversations. I stay present and I stay grounded now. I'm not saying I always have been, but I've definitely had to learn how to do that, because my true nature is one of curiosity. And if I can stay curious even when I'm uncomfortable, then I can stay deeply connected. And then my partner can feel safe in sharing what he needs to share, in saying what he needs to say, because I'm not reacting, I'm responding. And don't we want the same for our children? Don't we want the same kind of partners for them? Don't we want to raise our daughters and our sons in relationships to expect, to ask the question of themselves, not what can I do right now, but who can I be? And who am I being in this moment? Am I being someone that teaches everyone, just walk away and leave me the fuck alone, and I can't deal with this, this is too hard, this conversation, I don't want to? Or are we teaching them, this is a really difficult conversation and I'm struggling with it, so if we can slow the pace a little bit and just let me take in little bite sizes, I want to be present and I want to stay here and I want to stay in the discomfort of having this conversation. Because you can say all the right things. You can take all the right actions. But if they aren't aligned with what's happening inside you, people will feel that. Your sons, your daughter, your partner, your family, your friends, workmates, they feel it. So the work isn't about becoming better at performing connection. The work isn't becoming, well, it is actually. No, I'll forget that other isn't. Because it really is about performing connection. It's not as in to stop performing connection. The work is becoming more connected to yourself. Because when you are more connected to yourself and you have the self-awareness, you're aligned. Your words, your actions, energy naturally begin telling the same story. And right there, who you are being takes care of itself, because it's fundamentally sitting on a strong foundation of personal responsibility, of self-awareness, of self-trust. And who you are being becomes the question that you ask in all moments of your life. Hey, thanks for joining me on the Grounded Path. If today's conversation sparks something in you, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with another man who might benefit from hearing it. As you move through your week, remember this: you don't need another mask. You definitely don't need another coping mechanism. You don't need another version of yourself. You simply need the courage to reconnect with what's already true for you. Until next time, take care.